Hello again, fellow quilters, and welcome to Patchwork Quilts with Diane. My name's Diane, and this week I would like to share with you 4 things. A lovely fabric haul, the quickest and easiest quilt I have ever made, a review of February, and a look forward to March. So if you'd be interested in any of those, please continue watching. So let's start by looking at the beautiful fabric I bought. It's always a really good place to start. I was gifted some vouchers for my local fabric store, and I went along looking for some pink fabric to complete the commission quilt I made, the Queen of Hearts, in my last video. I couldn't find any of the pink that I wanted. However, something caught my eye. Something always does. And it was a set of 3 fat quarter bundles. There's 5 pieces in each bundle. There was only 3 left in the shop, and it's by a lovely designer that I really like, young artist called Bethany Salt. So there's some bits of information about Bethany Salt, and I'll show you the fabric. So there is this lovely pale blue with a dark leaf and some light bright, I can't really tell whether it's green, lime green or yellow on that. Then there is another, they're all florals. So there's this corally pink with blues and a sort of magenta with it. And a teal, it's like a tealy green, tealy bluey green. And then we have this lovely, look how rich that is. A teal background, all the same colours obviously, with peacocks, and then more peacocks with the feathers down this time, and some more orange and the magenta. And then there is a grey background, a mix between a sort of paisley and a feather. Well, you can see why I couldn't resist that. And then I went back, I thought about the quilt I might be making. I bought a yard extra of that, and the lovely blue, and the grey, and the coral. And then I thought, right, I know exactly what quilt I want to make with this fabric. So it's going to be a dark, rich one. It's going to have a navy blue background. And with this grey, I don't know if you can see, if you add a magenta pink to it, it sort of turns bluey grey. But if you add a coral with it, it brings out all the oranges. And then I bought a yard of this golden yellow to highlight. But there isn't a yard of this left now. Not that much at all really. I shall go back. They've got plenty of this in store because I've been using this in the spring equinox, and I've only got a tiny slither of the coral because I've been using that too. In fact, let me give you a sneaky peek. If I take you over to my ironing board. Oh, look at that! I'll show you that next week. I'm enjoying making this quilt. So that's the fabric that I bought, but I also had a little bit of change left over, and as I was leaving I noticed the oddments bin. You just can't walk away, can you? If it says for sale, you just need to look, and I did. And this is what I picked up. It's a fat quarter bundle. There are only 4 pieces in it. Cost me £5, so a bargain. So let's have a look at the fabric. And it's a popular design, it's Hot Wheels. My grandson assures me that these creatures aren't scary in the slightest. It says challenge your limits with some sort of big ape. There's a shark, bash and crash. There's a beast mode with, it looks like the gorilla's hand. And then there's a dinosaur one, another beast mode. So apparently this is really popular with younger boys. And so what you seem to be able to do is you get these small cars, and it's a friction action. So you run the car along a base and then it goes into this loop or the track. There's an orange track and you put it onto the track and then it loops around. It falls off. It's what boys like. Okay, I'm going to try and make this into a lovely boys quilt. So that's all of the fabric. So now I need to find something to complement that. Well, I haven't got anything in my Project Linus stash that will go with that. So I've taken from mine some navy blue, solid, and then some navy blue with white polka dots. And from the Project Linus stash, I have some more of this bamboo and cotton mix, 50-50, and that will be the backing. So that colour combination will work well. And now I need to think of a design. So the fat quarters are wider than they are deep, and on this quilt I want it, because these are directional, I want it to be the other way around. So I'm going to be chopping some off the width and adding it to the base so that it lengthens. But I don't want to cut into this too much because I want to preserve all of these images, so hardly any cutting. Okay, I'll iron these and then I think I'm just going to start cutting into it. Let's play with fabric. So I think one of the reasons why I made this Project Linus quilt is because I just finished the heart quilt. It was quite a big one and I felt a little bit tired. And I wanted to sew, but I didn't really want to make anything. I didn't want to design one. I didn't want to do anything complicated. Sometimes you just feel like you come into the sewing room and you just want to do a little bit of gentle sewing. It's a bit like an athlete on a warm down. I'm not an athlete. I know nothing about any of things to do sporty. But that's what I wanted. I wanted something really simple, and so I just cut away. And now I've pressed them and I've chopped off the salvages, and now I've just cut a strip 4 3/4 inches wide along the length of the fabric, and I'm going to cut those into squares now. And so I've got 3 squares from each set and I've set them aside, so I'm going to turn those into half square triangles with the navy blue solid, and I'll decide what design I'm going to use in a moment. And so I cut off the 4 3/4 inch strip because I tend to process my fabric in those. I know that I make a lot of scrappy quilts and I like to work in 3-inch squares. Someone recently asked me why I work in that size, and there is no real good reason for that. I just happened upon it, I think, and I enjoy the look of it, and it is a versatile size, so I can combine blocks in multiples of 3 and they all work together if you're doing sampler quilts and things like that. And so I tend to cut in those shapes, so whatever's left over from this quilt, I know I'll be able to combine it perhaps with other pieces of fabric that are cut to similar sizes. And now I've got 4 of these sizes, and they are deeper than they are wider. And now what I think I'm going to do is to cut a 3-inch strip off there, and then I'll cut a 3-inch navy, then sew them back together. And then I'll do the same along the bottom, cut a 3-inch off, add a 3-inch navy, and then sew it back on. And we'll have a look and see what that looks like. So I've decided to use just the solid navy. So I've got some 3-inch strips in the feature fabric and the navy, and the 4 3/4 inch strips, squares. And this now is squared up. So that's 12.5 inches by 17.5 inches approximately. So now the first thing I'm going to do is sew a navy blue strip down that side, and then I'll sew the coloured back onto it. So I've got 4 quadrants now with this blue banding, and they are directional, so there is a top row and a bottom row, and I want these narrow pieces to be in the centre. So I've got 2 on the left, 2 on the right, and now what I'm going to do is cut a 3-inch strip off the bottom of these 2, and then I'll cut a 3-inch strip off the top of the ones underneath. and then I'll add a blue border and sew it back together again. And that's what I've done so far. Sometimes when I'm just cutting and sewing fabric without a plan, I do get a little bit carried away. And that's it, completely finished. I've quilted it, and as you can see, I added another strip of the navy blue to form a sort of grid or metal grate. Now my grandson thinks this is one of my better quilts, and it puts me in mind of something I heard Pat Sloan say recently in one of her videos. She was doing a giveaway and she had a quilt that she wanted to give out to a particular group of people. It was a raffle, I think, the way it worked. And she called it a quilter's quilt. And I think as quilters, we look at quilts and we look at the skills involved in making that quilt. We look at the shapes, we look how it was put together. But somebody like a young child who this quilt is made for, he just said, Nanny, I think it's one of your better quilts. And for him it probably is, because it does everything he wants from a quilt. It's bright, it's got all the images on, it's nice and soft, it's nice and warm. So I think I need to bear that in mind more when I'm making these Project Linus quilts. Or maybe I won't. I just like making the quilts. I like making them my way. So, as simple as it is, it's the images that the younger child are interested in. So let's go up and have a closer look. And this is what drew his eye. All of these Hot Wheel characters and the cars. And it's a very simple quilting design. I've just followed the navy blue lines down and across, and then I've just measured equidistance between those bigger blocks and gone from left to right and right to left. And that's it, finished. And that's the backing in the navy blue and white stars. So I'll get this folded up and ready to take to Project Linus. And I haven't touched any of those 4 3/4 inch squares, so I shall store those away in my Project Linus stash and use them on another day. And so the downside of processing all the scraps into particular sizes is that you haven't got that spontaneity of picking up a scrap and just seeing where that leads you. It's been ages since I've made a proper improv quilt, and I have got a hankering and this has made it worse, just cutting without a plan. So it's not in me really to save scrappy bits of fabric, because I would find that difficult to have in my room. But there are lots of people, especially on Etsy and eBay, who sell scrap bags. So perhaps in the future I might buy someone else's scraps who haven't processed them, and I'll make an improv quilt. I've just made this up. Yep, that's a thing. I'll do that this year. I'll need to add that to my journal. Oh dear. Well, in February I've had a few more subscribers to my channel. Welcome everybody. And some of you have asked about my journal. I've mentioned that, and some of you have missed the earlier video about that, but you've asked. I'm not going to go into depth, but what it is just a spiral bound artist sketchbook. This one has little hearts on, and it has a little bow, and it also has a theme. This year, because of it being the Chinese year of the dragon, I have bought a lovely little dragon. I call her Layla. She sits on a flower pot in my sewing room, and I'll show you inside quickly. So on the first page I have a little card of a dragon, and there's just some little private notes in there, really sort of an affirmation to myself, saying, you okay, everything's all right, you're doing okay, that sort of thing in there. Give yourself a little treat, which I do sometimes. And then this page has another dragon on, and that has all of the things that I would like to do for this year, things I'm going to be working on. It's quite informal, it's not precious. I'm not precious about this book. This page is my thoughts about having a YouTube channel. So I'm quite new to YouTube, and it does take time to film and edit. I'm quite surprised with that, and it can be tiring. I'm not complaining, I do enjoy it. I love chatting to everybody all over the world. But yes, so that is really reviewing that for a year to see whether I shall continue doing that. I have no intentions at the moment to stop, but like I say, it does take time, and the time that I take to do that is times I'm not sewing, making quilts. So I'm just going to see how that impacts on that. It's a different sort of enjoyment from quilting, talking about quilting and sharing what I do. So that's that review, and I'll share that with you at the end of the year when I've made up my mind. And then on the next page is my Etsy page, and there's all details on there. So if we start off with the total views, last year there were 360, this year 415. Visits, last year 167, this year 173. Orders, I had 2 last year, I've had 3 this year. And the purple P's represent quilts that I've made for Project Linus. The revenue for this year is 285, last year it was 70. So if you combine January and February of last year, I'm still a little bit down. Etsy traffic for February, that was 69%, last year 83%. And these are people that are coming to my site, to my shop through Etsy, and directly through me. There was 31% this year, and there was 17% last year. And so not too bad overall, I think, considering the world economics at the moment. So I like to make a lot of quilts, and there's so many there's only so many I can have in my home, in my friends and family's homes, and so they go off. I don't charge huge amounts of money because I just really want to recoup the cost of the quilt, and I'm happy to do it that way. I know that other people think that I should charge what a quilt is worth, but really, how do you put a quantity to what a quilt is worth? I mean, it's like you can break it down into hours and the costs of the fabric and things, and the skills level. How do you price the skills level? It's just a huge rabbit hole that I'm not going to go into at the moment. But if you are a quilt creator and you do charge the money that a quilt perhaps deserves, I hate to use that word, I can feel myself slipping down that rabbit hole every time I open my mouth. Right, I'm going to stop that conversation. I'm not getting into that. But in my shop, I sell good quality quilts at very reasonable prices. You are not my target audience. I'm not trying to sell to a fellow quilter, but I do share with you what I'm doing in my Etsy shop. Oh dear, I need a big spade now, don't I, to get back out. So moving on, January. So each month I start a page with a month's name, and I just doodle, really. I put down things I'd like to do, things I plan to do. If there's any quilting commitments, they go in there. So that was February. Done and dusted. Quite an enjoyable month for some of us. Not going to say anything else. Anyway, in February I made the Queen of Hearts quilt, and I made the bookcase quilt, and I made the Friends of the Jungle quilt. Those are Project Linus quilts. And then I finished off the month with a third Project Linus, and that's the one you've just seen on the video. So that was February. So now looking forward to March. On the 20th of March, it's the spring equinox, and I'm making a quilt for that. I will make a Project Linus quilt. As yet, I have no idea what that will be. I'm going to work on the sustainable quilt only at the weekends. And this is the spring equinox quilt, La Primavera. Very excited about that. And there are 5 weekends in March, so I'm hoping to launch 5 YouTubes. So the first one is the one I'm recording at the moment. So that's the Hot Wheels, Project Linus, and the monthly review. The next one is the Primavera quilt, the spring equinox. So I've designed that and I'm making that at the moment, and that will launch on the 10th, all things going well. Possibly then on the 17th will be another Project Linus. I haven't designed that or thought about that, and there'll be 2 others, and I haven't thought about those at the moment. And so that's a little whistle stop tour of my journal, so I'm going to put that away now. And I'm going to end this video now with a little overview of the 3 quilts that I sold. And I'd like to thank you very much for watching, for sharing your precious time with me. Take really good care of yourselves. Thank you. See you next week. Bye.